Subscribe or they will haunt you. Therapists of Reddit, have you ever been genuinely scared of a patient, and why? Obligatory, not a therapist but an EMT. Had one part that calls us saying he overdosed on meds probably once every 1 to 2 months. Wears stuff with our logo and pretends to be on our ambulance service. This person used to show up to actual scenes and pretend to be one of our first responders. It took a deputy putting him in cuffs before he stopped. He also has a radio and a pager. Radio only receives and will record out conversations and send them to me. Strangely enough, he is actually a very nice person, and if you talk to him without mentioning the ambulance you would never know he has issues. Doesn't scare me but scares some of our more experienced crew members, so I'm guessing they know something I don't. This was early on in training, but a mandated client had dropped acid before the session, and it started coming on while we were talking. He didn't want to be there as it was and was much larger than me, 5 feet 0 inches. Once he got to threatening me for being the reason everything was wrong with the world, I ended up needing to get up and leave my own office to get a supervisor. I definitely thought he would hit and or strangle me if I stayed. The only one I have felt a little scared of was one who threatened to kill me. I knew she meant it. She had already assaulted a number of other staff. She got sent to a higher security ward, and I heard she had broke staff's fingers first day she was there. She held staff and other patients hostage in one of our rooms, threatening them, but circling the table, as if playing with them first. I see violence and aggression regularly, and it doesn't faze me, but she did. I would purposely avoid eye contact and look straight ahead, avoiding her, and pretend I wasn't intimidated, as that's what she wanted. I'm an actual therapist. The first in the thread. The only time I've ever been scared is when my physical safety is threatened, such as a patient blocking the door, hinting they know where I live, or implying they'd like to hurt or rape me. I have a stellar poker face, and once these really tough patients realize that I'm unfazed, they usually drop it. My strength in therapy is mostly just broad acceptance and tolerance of whatever they bring to the table. I'll let them know when I have to break confidentiality from the get-go, and that's that. When I was in med school, our psychiatry attending told that years ago she dyed her hair red. Few weeks later she had a patient who obsessed with redhead women. Patient was thinking about killing redhead women and then putting their plucked head into boxes. So she had 2 weeks off, and patient was carried by another doc. I was pretty nervous when the drunk partner of a client backed me into a corner, and pretty goddamn sweaty when a violent sex offender with a good 80 pounds on me blocked my exit and told me he was going to kill me and my family. The one that really got me long term was a 15-year-old girl in a residential program I worked at. She had substance use issues, which is why she was there. But it was clear from the jump that she had deep mental health stuff stemming from her child. She had been adopted out of a Russian orphanage, where she and a younger sibling has been left in a crib alone for God knows how long. Covered in lice and shaved bald. She had a lot of expected attachment issues, but talking to her was like talking to a black pit full of hatred. She hated everyone and everything, and had no conception of consequences, or what self-preservation was. She'd do stuff that would spin your head around in terms of how unsafe it was, and she just had no reaction. There was no getting through to her, as she needed the interventions when she was a very small child to be able to move forward successfully. She was discharged when it was found out that she was hiding knives under her mattress. I would not be surprised if she was in jail at this point. Worked with a patient that complained of reoccurring night terrors about lobsters being boiled alive. He couldn't figure out what was causing them. The fact he killed his GF, chopped her up, and boiled her head didn't seem come to him as a reason he might be having these dreams. My only fear is the system will have to release him one day, as they could never get him sane enough to stand trial. Yes, enough to quit my job. Had high caseload of suicidal teens. Most were medicated and low risk, but had 2 kiddos who had several suicide attempts prior to me. And while under my watch, I was getting physically ill, not sleeping well, constantly worried. I tried to transfer them to a higher level of care, but our company was greedy and didn't want to transfer them and lose those funds. I ended up quitting on the spot for these kids to be given a trauma-focused therapist and get the help they needed. Best decision for both myself and those kids. Not a therapist, but a school counselor, small young female. I have a student who is 6 feet 4 inches with emotional behavioral issues. Reading his social history made me cry because of all the shit he's been through. So, of course, I have a soft spot for him. But his anger gets out of control and it can be very scary. He punched a pole right in front of me once and narrowly missed my face. I looked at him in the eyes and sternly said, "Do you realize you almost just punched me in the face?" He snapped out of his rage and apologized profusely. I wanted to hug him and tell him everything was going to be alright. Edit. I messed up the last sentence and rewrote it. My uncle is one, and the answer is yes. Therapists aren't like they show in movies where they only deal with insanely complex and tough issues. Most of the people that come see him just have normal problems that most people can relate to. People seek therapy for a whole assortment of issues. So if someone goes to him with violent thoughts or deeply disturbing issues and ideologies, it shocks him like it would shock the rest of us. They are just trained to handle it better than the rest of us, but deep down their reaction to it is the same. Used to be a therapist at a behavioral health hospital. I had some patients who genuinely scared me in theory, but nothing ever happened with them. I was significantly attacked twice at work. Both patients were young women. Neither of them scared me beforehand. Both were incredibly quiet, withdrawn, and unassuming. One strangled me with my keys. My lanyard was a breakaway for that very reason, but she had tried to steal them several times that shift in attempt to escape the building and run into traffic. So I stupidly knotted off the breakaway portion. We carried panic buttons on the lanyards, and I was able to press it while being strangled with it. The other attack occurred when I was fairly new and on a low security unit. In view of other staff, I was walking away from the patient and she grabbed me by my hair, pulled me to the ground, and dragged me for several feet down the hallway, where she began kicking me in the chest and stomach. She was sent to a higher security unit as a result. I guess I was afraid of her after that, but she wasn't there long. There was law enforcement intervention after she assaulted a pregnant nurse, pulled her to the ground as well, and stomped on her stomach. In my first semester as a practicum therapist, I had a gentleman client bring a large hunting knife to session one day. He had it in his waistband in the back. He revealed it halfway through our session. He had been referred to our practice for anger issues. Another client, this enormous dude, confessed to punching a sleeping infant in the face and head repeatedly because he had become jealous of it. Then one day he comes into session. He seems more calm than usual. And as we discuss the previous week's session, he tells me about how much he hates his wife. And he had incidentally bought a gun to go deer hunting. We are in SoCal. That was the last session we had before he stopped coming. I still think about that guy a lot. I hope that baby's okay. When in doubt, report. Worked residential for 20 years. Had only 2 kids scare me. One put his baby sister in the freezer. She was found quickly and was okay. He was charming, a good looking kid and quite clever. Also no history of trauma or abuse. Serious serial killer vibes. One was horribly abused and somehow figured out I was pregnant. I wasn't showing at all since I was fat. He would just stare at my stomach. I asked to be moved to a different group. First kid was, or still may be, a case study for students at the local big university. Edit. To add why first kid was scary other than the horrible act,